traffic congestion. We have a very exciting setup today with three speakers, Richard Strossen, Marianne Weinreich, and Yael Wong. So let's just get started and not waste more time on the introductions. Next slide, please. My name is Søren Hansen. I'm a project director in Ramboll, or in Henning Larsen, which is a part of the Ramboll Group. And I have been the team leader for the ASEAN Australian Smart Cities Trust Fund, which is setting this event up. I'll be the moderator for today. Please go ahead. And just starting with a couple of housekeeping announcements. First of all, we have a number of interpretations, online interpretations, and you can just click on the globe button and select the language. Then you'll have a simultaneous translation. Next slide, please. Or you can have a live transcript of the session also. Click on the button to the far left to enable live transcription. Please, next slide. And when I hope later in the session we'll have a very interactive discussion, and you can react to what you hear on the reactions button, use emojis, you can raise your hand, or you can click on the chat button and ask questions. Then I'll do my best to facilitate the discussion. Next slide, please. So the session here is about digitalization and how digitalization can reduce traffic congestions with examples from Southeast Asia, Australia, and Europe. And to facilitate this dialogue, we have stakeholders from all over the Asian countries, and they are participating here. And they are discussing how digital tools can be used for smart mobility planning, which obstacles there are for using digital tools, and which way forward there are. Next slide, please. So this is the agenda. First of all, just to get started, a short icebreaker in between the different presentations. Then we'll have one presentation about the newly calibrated vision microsimulation model for Penang. We'll have a presentation about gender and mobility, and we'll have a presentation about India's smart mobility strategies. Then after, we'll have a Q&A session with a guided discussion. Next slide, please. So let's start with the first Mentimeter icebreaker. What is the world's most congested city? Maybe Elga, you can start the Mentimeter. So if you just go into mentimeter.com and use the code on the top, then you can give a suggestion on which city you think is the most congested city. Mexico comes up here. Do we have more? Jakarta. Two very good suggestions. Manila. That's a good suggestion too. I can say when I come with the final result, it will be taken from the TomTom traffic index in 2019. I could have used 2020, 2021, but these years were influenced by the COVID situation, so they have a very biased result. So I used 2019, which had almost a full year running in normal traffic. Are there more suggestions than Jakarta, Manila, Mexico? Okay, Ho Chi Minh City. That's also a very good suggestion. Okay, I think we'll stop the Mentimeter now, and I'll reveal what the result is. From the TomTom's the traffic index for 2019, the number one congested city in the world is Bangalore in India. Number two is Manila. Number three is Bogota. Jakarta is number 10. Mexico City is number 13. And I usually live in Copenhagen, which is number 269. So there are many different traffic congestion implications around the world. Manila is considered the most congested mega city in the world at the moment. A couple of years ago, Jakarta was ranked highest, but Manila has taken over that position. Next slide, please. So with these icebreakers about traffic congestion, I think we'll hear the first presentation about development of a calibrated VISIM microsimulation model for Penang. Mr. Richard Sprosen has been the team leader for this project. He's a market manager in Rumble, and he's a team leader for this project, which is run under the trust fund, ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund. Please start. I should say that Richard Sprosen could not participate physically, so he has recorded his presentation. Please start the presentation.
Hi, I'm Richard. I'm the task lead for the Penang Smart Mobility Microsimulation Model development that we are currently undertaking with Digital Penang and MVPP in Malaysia. So the task order aims to develop transportation modeling capabilities within Digital Penang and MVPP. The idea of this is to enable ongoing independent transport planning with the best practice processes from around the world to be conducted by MVPP within Penang without the need for external studies. The study team is developing a microsimulation transport model of Georgetown, Penang in collaboration with the authority. And through that process, we're developing knowledge of modeling through ongoing engagement with MVPP and Digital Penang as we're developing the model, bringing them closely through the process as we go through all the technical tasks and testing all of the outcomes of that modeling. And at the end of the task order, we're going to be providing accredited training and PTV VISIM software for MVPP to have ongoing capabilities in the use of transport microsimulation modeling. So they don't just get a video, they get a full model, they get the software and the training on how to use that model. So in Georgetown, Penang, like a lot of cities in the ASEAN region, it has a problem of narrow streets where you really can't get much more capacity through those streets, be that pedestrians or cars. There's a lot of on-street parking, and that provides a lot of congestion problems, especially around double parking, blocking back, things like that. there's a lack of footpath space. So that creates in some places an unsafe environment with people needing to walk along the road. And there is a bit of a lack of reliability of public transport and the opportunity to improve public transport services within Penang. But this task order wasn't about finding solutions to the problems in Penang because there's no shortage of great ideas. There's no shortage of great studies that have been done in the past. The Penang Transport Master Plan and the Penang Green Transport Plan that outlines a network of pedestrianised streets, of public transport improvements, shared streets, and other really great transport concepts. The challenge is there is a need for an assessment of these solutions, an evaluation of what's the best ones, what is the best to implement, and a better communication to
នឹងឧបសគ្គបំផុតសម្រាប់ការផ្សព្វផ្សាយក៏ដូចជាដំបូងគឺយើងត្រូវតែសិក្សាអំពី MVP ហើយនឹងសាធារណជនទូទៅដើម្បីអ្វីដែលជាការប្រែប្រួលនិងតើអ្វីដែលអាចជួយពង្រឹងទៅដល់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋនៅការរស់នៅរបស់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋក្នុងក្រុងពេណាំងបានចឹងអ្វីដែលយើងបានធ្វើឡើងពាក់ព័ន្ធជាមួយនឹងការពិវត្ត
beberapa model simulasi mikro menggunakan software bernama PTV Visim begitu. Di mana software ini merupakan simulasi lalu lintas multimodal yang sangat mutakhir di dunia.
ที่โตเบิ่งว่าเฮ็ดจังไดจังจะเฮ็ดให้ความแออัดรถนี่ให้มันน้อยลงโดยเฉพาะสำหรับผู้ที่ใช้หนทางนั้นแล้วก็ซอฟต์แวร์ตัวนี้ที่ถูกเอามานำใช้ก็คือว่านั่นล่ะเดี๋ยวนี้กำลังเป็นที่หนึ่งในโลกเลยซอฟต์แวร์ตัวนี้
Vì vậy, Visum cho phép chúng ta có thể tạo ra những thay đổi. Ví dụ như là một cái mạng lưới đường xá nè, cho phép chúng ta đo lường là cái lượng giao thông ở một cái thời điểm nhất định nè, và cho phép chúng ta xem được tác động của nó đối với khí hậu như thế nào, và biết được là phương tiện giao thông cho người đi bộ và cái tương tác nó có hiệu quả hay không. Cái phương tiện giao thông công cộng và mức độ ưu tiên của giao thông công cộng cho phép chúng ta có thể biết được là ví dụ là trong tương lai nếu như mà có sự ứng dụng của các phương tiện giao thông tự vận hành ấy thì nó sẽ như thế nào, và việc ứng dụng của việc xe đạp như thế nào. Cho nên là dự án của chúng tôi sẽ khởi đầu bằng việc thu thập dữ liệu Penang, là chúng tôi sẽ có những cái khảo sát bằng video, và sau đó chúng tôi gắn video để mà khảo sát, và sau đó xem xét là lượng tải giao thông như thế nào. Và sau đó chúng tôi sẽ phát triển mô hình bằng cách sử dụng các hình ảnh vệ tinh với thông tin như vậy thì và sau đó chúng tôi lập trình cái mô hình để làm sao mà nó có thể khác với thực tế nhất, và sau đó chúng tôi sẽ kiểm tra các kịch bản trong mô hình đó, thay đổi tức là cái nhu cầu thay đổi về lượng giao thông, về thời gian đèn xanh đèn đỏ, và từ đó đưa ra các ứng dụng khác nhau, thay đổi coi là cái cách thay đổi nào hiệu quả. Và điều này cho phép chúng tôi đưa ra quyết định tốt hơn, cho phép NPPP có thể so sánh các tùy chọn và từ đó tìm ra giải pháp tốt nhất để xem cần đầu tư vốn vào dự án nào, đầu tư vốn vào cái thay đổi nào, và chúng ta có thể thử nghiệm bất cứ một cái ý tưởng nào. Mình có cái ý tưởng nào thì mình có thử nghiệm trong mô hình này, và nếu mà không được thì chúng ta thử nghiệm lại, bởi vì nó là mô hình mô phỏng mà, và chúng ta có thể chọn ra một cái mà có ít cái đánh đổi tiêu cực nhất. Và ở đây thì có một vài cái chiết xuất mà chúng tôi có thể
สามารถเฮ็ดให้เฮานี่แบบว่าเว้าในเรื่องการใช้ของมันนี่มันจะคุ้มกับงบที่ต้องใช้บ่แต่ละไอเดียต่างๆแล้วเฮาก็ต้องมาเบิ่งแต่ละโมเดลนี่แต่ละแบบอย่างนี่ที่เฮาสิออกแบบออกมานี่เฮาต้องมาเบิ่งว่าเวลาการเดินทางเวลาการความแน่นอนของการเดินทางแล้วก็มาเบิ่งในการขนส่งด้านสาธารณะในการรอท่าเรียงคิวต่างๆเนี่ยเฮาก็ต้องมาเบิ่งให้มันหมดบัดนี้เฮาก็ต้องเบิ่งในการบัดนี้การสื่อสารที่ให้เฮ็ดให้มันดีขึ้นเฮามาเบิ่งเฮ็ดให้การก็ต้องสร้างการเข้าร่วมที่ให้มันดีขึ้นกับผู้ที่ถือประโยชน์แล้วก็
untuk saling terhubung dalam simulasi 3 dimensi sehingga orang-orang dapat saling terhubung di jejaring tersebut. Dari layanan ini kita melihat gambar 3 dimensi dan kita melihat bagaimana lalu lintas yang sedang terjadi pada saat itu. Jadi sehingga para pejalan kaki, para pemilik kendaraan juga dapat melihat situasi secara langsung, khususnya bagi para pejalan kaki yang malas sekali untuk berjalan di jalanan yang sedang ramai gitu ya. Jadi saya rasa cara ini dapat mengkomunikasikan untuk mendapatkan respon para masyarakat untuk meningkatkan transportasi atau informasi mengenai lalu lintas secara real time begitu. Dan inilah merupakan penggambaran dari model tersebut. Jadi ke dalam kesimpulannya, dalam model simulasi mikro di Penang, ada beberapa implikasi dari kebijakan yang berbeda. Kita masih perlu mengevaluasi dan mengkomunikasikan implementasi dari solusi dan kebijakan transportasi ini untuk memberikan pengetahuan lebih kepada publik mengenai perancangan Georgetown sehingga masyarakat dapat memahami apa itu strategi mobilitas pintar dan perencanaan transportasi yang lebih baik. Jadi keputusan ini ada di tangan pemerintah lokal atau pemerintah nasional untuk memahami.
Contribute towards congestion in the city. So we've just completed our pilot area study, which is of a smaller part of Penang. And what we're embarking on shortly is expanding this to the full UNESCO World Heritage area of Georgetown. It's a much larger simulation area, and we'll be calibrating that VISM model. And then we'll be testing some scenarios within that larger area, and we'll be handing that model over to Digital Penang and MBPP for further use. We're looking at changes to the TIA guidelines so that microsimulation modeling can be better embedded in the processes and policies within Penang. And as I mentioned, we'll be conducting some accredited VISM training for staff at MBPP and Digital Penang so that they can continue to use the transport model and to further develop it in the future. We'll be then handing over the transport model and going through a monitoring and evaluation process in the future. And shortly we'll be releasing our interactive guide where you can have a look at the model, you can have a look at what we're testing and the results of that model. That's through an interactive PDF to show some of the results of our stage 1 process. And I encourage you to have a look at that when it's released. But that's all from me. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation. Thank you. Hi, I'm Richard. I'm the task lead for the Penang Smart.
So thank you very much to Richard Spurgeon. This was a recorded presentation as he couldn't participate personally to give his presentation. But after the presentations, we have Yen Xu from Smart Mobility in Rahul, and we have Dr. Ashita Pereira, Director at JA Consult. They will answer questions instead of Richard Spurgeon. Next slide, please. So next icebreaker. How large a proportion of Copenhagen's citizens commute daily to work on bicycle? Please go into to the Mentimeter with the QR code or directly to the website with the entry code and give us a fair bit on what is a number of in percentage Copenhagen citizens commuting daily to work on bicycles. You can see the mentimeter.com and the use code on top of the slide here. Please see if you can hit the right number in percent. I'll give you a couple of minutes to reflect. Does anyone dare to give it a shot? Or are people searching the internet to get the right answer? Maybe it seems on my chat that there might be an issue with the internet server. Then it's allowed not to give an answer. But I can give you the answer. Last year, we had 62% of the commuters in Copenhagen using a bicycle, which is a huge benefit for the city. Because think if those 62% instead sat in their own car, it would have been a complete mess in the city of Copenhagen. And that's one of the reasons why Copenhagen is down as ranked as number 269 on the TomTom congestion list of the world. So a mode shift in transportation can do a lot of good things for cities. Question is, how can we do a mode shift? And are there some issues with the traffic system in Norway? Next slide, please. Please go to the next slide. So, about mobility and gender, we have Marianne Weinreich, who is market manager for smart mobility in Rumble in Copenhagen. She's also chair of Cycling Embassy of Denmark, and she has very important messages and studies to present to us about gender and mobility. Please take the floor, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Søren. And thank you for mentioning cycling, since, as you said, I am chair of the Cycling Embassy of Denmark. Next slide, please. And thank you for the invitation to this very interesting webinar. I've been looking forward to sharing the findings of a study. If you can take the next slide, please, that we have been conducting in Rampen about gender and mobility. Can I have the next slide, please? And the next. In Rampen Smart Mobility, we're a team of about 300 people in these 8 countries, from Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Germany, India, Singapore, and the newest addition, Australia. And we have conducted a big study on gender and mobility in the capitals and the countries of these 7 of the 8 countries. And I will share those findings today. Next slide, please. It's a part of a series of so-called green papers, discussion papers, that we conduct every year within the topic of sustainability. We dig into a topic where we don't have all the answers, but we partner up with clients and other stakeholders to look for answers. And next slide, please. In this report, we teamed up with the Rampen Foundation and public transport in Helsinki, in Stockholm, and in Berlin, as well as the road authority in Sweden. And what we did was collect existing data about use, gender disaggregated, by all modes. We interviewed experts on gender and mobility in all the 7 countries, and we conducted a survey of 3,500 men and women, 500 in each capital, about their challenges, concerns, and associations with different modes. And then we did focus group interviews with a total of 40 women in these 7 countries. Next slide, please. And what I'm going to do is give you a very brief walkthrough of the key findings, but the report is available online for you to dig into the many, many findings. But the one key finding that I would like to convey here today is transport is not gender neutral. Many people also in the sector think that is the case, but it isn't. Actually, International Transport Forum has concluded that gender is one of the most robust determinants of transport choice overall. Next slide, please. And the reason for that is because transport is a reflection of the things we need to do in our daily lives. And it also reflects thereby some of the structural gender differences that we still see in society. We see that women, to a less extent than men, work full-time and to a great extent have part-time, and to some extent don't work. We see that in the workforce, we see that there is still a gender pay gap. And we also see that, for instance, when it comes to paternity leave, women have the majority of the paternity leave. And still, we have about 75% of the unpaid care work in the world being done by women. And all of this and lots more attributes to the things we need to do in our daily lives, and that's also reflected in transport. Next slide, please. If we look at the modes, and now when I'm talking about this, I am talking about what we see in data. That does not mean that there are not men that does something else, or women that do something else than what I'm saying here. I'm just explaining, when we look at the data, what are the key findings. And what we see generally across the world and the 7 countries that we looked into, we see that women walk more than men, and women use public transport more than men. We see that men drive more. Women are more likely to be passengers if in a car. And we also see that men use new mobility services like car sharing or ride sharing or e-scooters to a much greater extent than women. And when it comes to cycling, we see that in most cities, it's a male-dominated activity, except for countries like Denmark and the Netherlands, where we have a 50-50 or even slightly higher amount of women cycling. And that is because of the safe cycling infrastructure. And I'll get back to that, how women are an indicator for how safe it is to cycle in a city. Next slide, please. When we look at travel patterns, the fact that women do 75% of the unpaid care work in the world, we see in travel patterns that men, to a greater extent than women, have the classic A to B travel pattern that we talk a lot about. It's home, work, commute, whereas, and it's longer distances, whereas for women, we see that women more often than men travel shorter distances, but have multiple stops. It's called trip chaining, and it often involves traveling and with children or assisting other family members. It involves chores or grocery shopping and going, picking up children or accompanying them to school or activities. Next slide, please. We also see that women, to a much greater extent than men, think about which route to take, especially in the evening or at night, because time of day plays a much bigger role when traveling than men because women have, to a great extent than men, a fear of harassment and assault, especially while walking or using public transport at night. Next, please. And when it comes to cycling, as I mentioned, I would like to use cycling as an example here. The Australian researcher, Dr. Jean Girard, has said that women are considered an indicator species for bike-friendly cities. First of all, it's in research also found that women are more averse to risk in general in life than men. And in cycling, that is shown by the fact that if it is not safe to cycle, women won't do it. We're kind of smart that way, you would have to say. And also because women, to a greater extent than men, accompany children, it is of utmost importance that that you can arrive safe and make sure that you and your children arrive safe to your destinations and get home at the end of the day. And in our survey in these 7 capitals of 3,500 men and women, we also see that when we ask which are the challenges or concerns that you have in relation to cycling, weather was the main one for both men and women. Traffic safety was second, but we see significant more women than men have ticked off traffic safety as a concern. And also traveling with groceries and bags, we see that more women than men have that as a challenge and a concern by cycling. So that's why building safe cycling infrastructure is a key to actually having more inclusive and more equal mobility. There's a lot of noise on the line here. I don't know who is, so
1 minute left.
It's a
Sorry,
core.
1 minute left at my end.
Yes, I am also done. I think I have one more slide. And in the focus group interviews, they revealed that in general that women, even if we looked at Copenhagen, Helsinki, or Delhi and Singapore, women all over the world have, independent of each other, developed these strategies that they use when using public transport and walking, from walking with keys between their fingers to maybe having a bigger coat, making sure you sit close to the driver of the bus or in the train, simply because they have experienced or are afraid to experience harassment or assault. And then again, the need for safe cycling infrastructure, and when it is in place, how empowering it is for women to be cycling, because cycling really fits the trip chaining pattern with shorter trips and multiple destinations, but it's also a way of feeling safer at night instead of walking and using public transport when it comes to personal safety. And next slide. I think that was it from me. Yes, and the reason why this is a challenge to actually have this knowledge and do gender mainstreaming is that we have an unconscious bias in transport planning by the fact that only 22% of people working in transport are women. So we need to really put focus on this and make sure that it is included in policies, in actions, and in the services that we develop going forward. So thank you for that. That was it from me.
Thank you very much, Marianne. I think this is one of the points that are very, very important within transport planning and mobility planning going forward. We definitely need to take this new information that you provide into account and really embed it in the way we are doing urban planning and mobility planning going forward. So thank you very much for opening our eyes to this very important issue we have. Now to the third last icebreaker. I'm told that the Mentimeter should be working again. So could you please go into the Mentimeter and try to give it a shot? What is the average car commuting time in Bangkok? Let's see if we can, 45 minutes. Two hours, 45 minutes. One hour. Three. I hope it's hours, not minutes. $90 minutes, yes. $62 minutes. That's very precise. And actually, if I'm revealing the result here, it might be correct. 1 hour might also be correct. What I have in front of me on my screen, I have 1 hour. And I definitely think if we look at all the different numbers we have on the screen, they will appear sometimes in Bangkok. Sometimes it will be 2 hours. Sometimes it might be 3 hours. And sometimes you can go through in average in 30 minutes. But what I can see from TomTom's data here, the average commuting time without delays is 30 minutes in car, and in average there's an extra 30 minutes on top of the travel time due to congestion. Okay, so with this, go to the next slide, please. So now I'll welcome Mr. Yale Wong from the Indonesia-Australia Partnership for Infrastructure, KIAT. Yale, you will be talking about ASEAN or Indonesia's smart mobility strategies. Please take the floor, Yale.
Thank you very much, Soren. It's fantastic to be here. Selamat siang and a very good afternoon, everybody, from Jakarta, home of KIAT. And we know from the Mentimeter information, next slide, please. So we know from the Mentimeter information, we are the 10th most congested city, but I think not incorrect to say that maybe we aspire to be like our Danish friends, and 296 maybe on that league table. So if we can get the slide deck up, please, operators. I'd like to share a little bit about some of the work. So I have responsibility over the strategy, coordination, delivery, oversight of our urban mobility program of work. So I want to give some general commentary around smarter mobility strategies, but also sharing some of the work that we've been doing in this space as well. So on the next slide, just very quickly. So KIAT is a 10-year technical assistance facility jointly managed by governments of Australia and Indonesia, looking to provide better access to infrastructure for all people. And we're structured around these three end of facility outcomes to improve the policy and regulatory environment and the design and delivery of infrastructure projects. So on the next slide, just as a bit of a teaser perhaps, but it's always useful to ask, I think, what we mean by smart city. And I always seeing in the articles or hearing the Elon Musks of the world or other sort of, there's a lot of technological determinism sort of viewpoints out there as well. It needs to be one with flying cars or with the Hyperloop or things like that. And often we're caught in this hype cycle without being grounded in terms of what are the objectives of the technology, and also sometimes forgetting about some of the unintended consequences, autonomous cars, what it means for the modal mix, for traffic congestion and the like. So big question around how we harness the greater good of technology and ensuring that digital disruption results in net benefits as well. So I really like the networking days theme to make it from technocentric to people-centric. So on the next slide, I think I would contend that it's important to really start at the earliest upstream intervenable point, targeting the policy, the planning, the governance, the legal and the regulatory parameters before we walk before we run. So on the next slide, please. A little bit about the Indonesian context, very rapidly growing megacities, more than 20 cities with populations over 1 million people, and vast inequalities around that access to opportunities and services, places with public transport, places with footpaths, and then you go to the next street and then you're walking on the street with the
ในด้านโอกาสหรือว่าการให้บริการและก็ในการสัญจรสาธารณะโดยเฉพาะการลำเลียงหรือว่าสัญจรที่แบบบ่ได้ใช้รถพาหนะต่างๆแล้วเขาก็จะมาเขาเจ้าก็สิแบบเน้นไปใส่แบบว่าเรื่องใหญ่ๆหรือว่าประเด็นสำคัญโดยแล้วก็บางเทื่อนี่ก็เฮ็ดให้ลืมเรื่องที่ว่าน้อยๆแต่ว่าก็สำคัญคือกันซึ่งอันนี้นโยบายที่ทางรัฐบาลออกมานี่มันก็พยายามที่จะเฮ็ดให้มันมีความต่อเนื่องและก็การผสมผสานกันสไลด์ต่อไปนี่เป็นการในด้านการทำงานของเฮาที่เฮ็ดอยู่เครียดนี่
Đó chính là cái kế hoạch giao thông bền vững. Có rất là nhiều thành phố Indonesian
maybe they lack that sort
tại
of
khu vực này ấy, họ thiếu được một cái chiến lược
want their cities to look in the future, 5 years, 10 years, and the like. So often cities receive market-led proposals, and Jakarta is one example, Bali is another. There's so many that come in, often these vendor-led sort of marketing schemes, and it can be difficult for cities to make decisions that are consistent, that are in the best interest for all. So Indonesia now has this rule, I guess, where cities, as a precondition to obtain national level funding, they must have sustainable urban mobility plans in place. So KIAT is supporting in 3 metropolitan areas, not just cities. More people live outside of the city proper in Indonesia than within the city. It's really the entire functional urban area, the labor market. So we're supporting in the Sabagita metropolitan area around Denpasar city in Bali, and then also the Maminasata area around Makassar in South Sulawesi, and also Kadansupur, which is around Semarang city in central Java as well. So the sump process is very much with the community and for the community. We establish working groups. We work very closely with the Bapadas and the SHUPs, the transportation and the planning agencies, working together with the community, developing long-term visions, conducting very evidence-based baseline analysis, looking at different land use transport development scenarios going into the future and preparing a strategy that is consistent with that and action plans as well. So on the next slide, we see some examples from one of our cities in Semarang around what that entails. So identifying those nodes, those activity centers, those sort of secondary centers, the development corridors, the transport corridors as well, and the priority that is required for each one. And not just looking at transport and land use, but even or passenger transport, but even things like freight. It's very much a very multifaceted, comprehensive strategy to guide the future development of these cities. So very proud of this work and the buy-in that we're able to get from local government and the benefits that will bring in terms of more cohesive and values-led policy making. On the next slide, a bit of an aside, but the process is, but I guess on the digitalization theme of this session, it is very intensive and very difficult in the absence of full data availability. So we do things like looking at proxy measures like light intensity to identify commerce, sketch mapping in the absence of full demand models. And one of the important and critical aspects is how we actually build sustainability in terms of knowledge sharing through provision of data repositories and knowledge sharing and management platforms as well for our counterparts. On the next slide, the recommendations are very comprehensive. They go from micro to macro, but I guess on the theme of being smart and on things that are often neglected, I think is the micro angle. It's the tactical urbanism. It's the how we design our cities. It's the things that might not garner the same attention or the same sort of interest from funders or vendors and the like, but often make much better return on investment and make the environment a lot better. So around how you can improve the land use sort of diversity, provide pedestrian-oriented design to make cities truly livable. And there's a whole host of sort of recommendations and action items around better digitalization to support better, I guess, traffic congestion outcomes and also
Từ đã giảm tải để ách tắc giao thông. Thì đấy là một cái tính mà các thành phố đang thiếu. Trên slide tiếp theo thì chúng ta sẽ cùng chúng tôi ở Jakarta đã làm rất là nhiều ở cấp độ địa phương cho cái việc nâng cao cái sự sử dụng phương tiện giao thông công cộng và đồng thời có một cái hệ thống MRT thật là lớn. Chương trình này không phải là cái chúng tôi trực tiếp làm nhưng mà nó rất là gần với điều mà chúng tôi làm. Ở mỗi Jakarta thì các bạn sẽ thấy được là có cái hashtag. Thì đây là cái đường dẫn.
Indonesia, comparing to Australia, where I worked in academia and consultancy.
Indonesia thì cùng với Australia ở Úc đấy, thì chúng tôi làm nhiều với cơ quan và nhiều cái viện để mà có thể đưa ra cái cách xử lý tốt nhất. Cho nên cái thử thách ở đây đó trong cái việc là chúng ta biến ra những cái giải pháp như thế nào. Để khiến cho cái kế hoạch thuê bao nó dễ hơn. Từ đó người dân có thể được khuyến khích sử dụng tàu điện ngầm hơn.
Congestion outcomes as well. So that's a big opportunity, I think, in the region. So next slide.
Slide tiếp theo cũng là slide cuối cùng. Một lần nữa chúng ta cùng nhìn lại bức tranh tổng thể của thành phố như thế nào và những cái yếu tố chính yếu, yếu tố then chốt cần thiết để trở thành một cái thành phố thông minh hơn, không chỉ về mặt công nghệ như tôi đã nói mà còn là về cái chúng ta ứng dụng công nghệ như thế nào, về hoạt động như thế nào, về chính sách như thế nào và quản trị như thế nào, và chúng ta sẽ cần một cái sự rõ ràng hơn, minh bạch hơn trong cái quá trình thực hiện chính sách và lên chính sách về cơ sở hạ tầng và cái việc là sử dụng nguồn nước như thế nào. Nó mang lại phúc lợi cho những ai. và nó mang lại phúc lợi cho khu vực nào, hay là chỉ có một vài thôi? Có rất là nhiều thứ chúng ta còn có thể làm để có thể cải thiện cái khả năng truy cập vào cái việc sử dụng phương tiện giao thông công cộng, khiến cho nó dễ dàng hơn, khiến cho nó vệ sinh hơn, sẵn sàng và vệ sinh hơn, và có thể ví dụ như là tập trung vào, có nghĩa là tập trung vào phát triển nâng cao cơ sở hạ tầng trước khi tập trung vào kết quả. Và tôi nghĩ rằng câu hỏi chúng ta cần đặt ra ở đây,
and I think more discussion might come in the Q&A afterwards around the evaluation of projects, around how we look at infrastructure and services, and also integration opportunities and some key opportunities outlined there. So I'll finish up there. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and very much looking forward to continuing the conversation in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yale, for giving us an insight into how you're working with mobility, smart mobility strategies. Could we have the next slide, please? Yes. I think this is the end of the three presentations. Quick run through the different aspects of mobility planning, from the technologies we're using to assess and plan, through certain issues about gender and how we are setting up transport planning systems for different genders, and finally how we're working with the strategies going forward to accommodate for the future growth of cities and the future population. So thank you very much for those very insightful presentations. So now I will open the floor to questions. Everybody can raise their hand or send their question in the chat box. Please, if you have any questions. Then maybe I can start out with a question to our panel. Until while people are considering which questions they would put forward. United Nations has for the last many years forecasted that 70% of the world's population will be living in the cities in 2050. Coming from transportation planning and mobility planning, I have certain issues with that forecast, because how can cities cope with that enormous concentration of population in cities, while we already today have huge issues with congestion in cities. So my question is to the panel, and maybe we could start with Yale. How do you see cities in the future if we are in this situation where 70% of people have migrated to the bigger cities? Is that at all possible?
Well, it's a great question and a lot of food for thought, I think, and I suspect the 70% might be a pre-coronavirus pandemic sort of projection as well. But I think cities are definitely here to stay. Cities are important. Humans are social creatures, and we collaborate and we interact. And cities are a more efficient way of housing people. But also, I think there are sort of trends the other way around, sort of decentralization of work, hybrid work. The role of CBDs, I think they're really evolving. I don't think they're dying, but maybe how the role of offices and the like might change in the future. So there's some questions around the forecast and the sort of projections there. I think I don't think it's necessary, hopefully it doesn't need to be necessarily linked in terms of traffic congestion and big cities. So Greater Jakarta, the Jabodetabek regional area, bring together all the, within the large labor market, I think it is the second largest by population metropolitan area in the world after Greater Tokyo. And I'm not sure if Tokyo is also on that list of the traffic congestion or anywhere near the top, but I mean, it's quite evident that the provision of having adequate modal mix where you're moving people in spatially efficient forms of transport, so not single occupancy vehicles, mass transit, having very excellent coverage both in time and in space is a very important component, and also decentralization of the centers of activity generators, attractors, and the like. I think that's very much a big part and parcel of making cities making cities livable, and I guess making it a net benefit for people, and not just all the unintended consequences and the externalities that come with it. So I think it's the challenge amongst all of us working in in the region and the areas is how we can harness technology and policies and the like to support sort of modal shift. But I guess before you shift, the alternatives have to exist first. So that's a challenge. It's a lot of and oftentimes it's political as well. We were talking about things like reallocating existing road space. It's not necessarily building new right of way, tunneling, bridges, property acquisition that are the most expensive. There's so much you can do for very little money just by redesignating existing road space to more spatially efficient, temporally efficient modes of transport, public transport, high capacity public transport, and the like. And that's so much of that is political will, and it is it's a difficult one, but hopefully we can be improving.
Chúng ta có thể làm được. Vì vậy tôi hy vọng rằng là thời gian có thể trả lời cho các cái thắc mắc này một cách hiệu quả hơn. Có một câu hỏi.
Mình speak up on bạn cứ còn mình chỉ mình muốn thay dương đặt sẵn apa nha bạn but thật ra dương patrolในព័ត៌មានទាំងអស់ឬក៏ព័ត៌មានទាំងអស់នេះបានបែបណាទៅបាទខ្ញុំគិតថានេះគឺជាសំណួរដែលគួរចាប់អារម្មណ៍បើដោយសារតែយើងកំពុងតែនិយាយអំពីការរយៈពេលនៃការធ្វើអន្តរកម្មនោះថាតើយើងអាចធ្វើបែបណាដើម្បីដែលជានៅក្នុងទីក្រុងម៉ានីឡាបាទដើម្បីឲ្យយើងអាចនឹងជំរុញឲ្យហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធដឹកជញ្ជូនសាធារណៈរួមជាមួយនេះអាចបន្តទៅបានអញ្ចឹងហើយនឹងតើយើងធ្វើបែបណាទៅបាទ
a lot of information
ហើយមានព័ត៌មានជាច្រើនផងដែរ
What is how can that be done? How can we work in the transition period from today's manual systems to future digitized transport systems? Maybe I don't know, Yang Hu or Ashita Pereira, if one of you could try to give a shot on that answer.
Okay, maybe I can give a shot. I think that's a very great question. From my perspective, because we do traffic evaluation with simulation softwares and a modeling method. I think for us, it's just to understand what is the reasonable capacity of this type of informal systems. and how it benefits the people using them, and trying to consider those in terms of our analysis. So no matter what form of the system is, it should be considered in the overall planning of things, to evaluate their effectiveness and their capacity. And if one deems to be quite useful to the users, and then that could be recommended as part of the transport development in the future, to be further regularized and making the informal ways of transport into a more formal way people that travel, and part of the very important part of the overall mobility system.
Maybe I can add to the question. Maybe actually many cities has a much higher capacity within the public transport system than we know about, because we have the informal supporting the system, which is not, it's not come to the surface, and it's not known. So maybe we have a big capacity there, and supply of public transport that we don't know. What is your opinion about that?
Can I add something?
Sorry, carry on, Marianne. I'll come in after you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt. I would just say, I think it's a matter of making sure that you recognize that these so-called informal modes are actually part of the mobility system. I don't think that the modes should adapt to a smart digitalized city. I think it's the other way around, that we need to figure out how to integrate these very important modes like walking and cycling that are not as digitalized, and that a lot of that is also about quality and not necessarily about numbers. And also, I have to say, I think the wording and the language around this is also a reflection of that we have a very car-centric planning, that these modes are being modularized and called informal, because it is such an important part of cities to be walking. We all walk to the car, to public transportation, or just for transportation. So I definitely hope that the smart city is also smart in the way that means intelligent, meaning that we cater for those so-called informal modes and include them, and find ways to make sure that we collect data so that we can improve the conditions. Because otherwise, the first question you asked, Søren, about the 70% in cities, we will simply have a total chaos and meltdown, and we need to reallocate space, and we need to limit the space for insufficient or ineffective and space-consuming transport, like single vehicle car driving. We need to be better at using the space we have at hand.
Thank you, Marianne. Over to you, Dr. Ashita Perera.
Yeah, thank you, Søren. Okay, just a little bit adding on to what we've already heard about the transport, the formal and informal, yeah, the dichotomy of it. I think a little step further that we need to probably look into is also the land use and the spatial planning here, because the dichotomy part about it is also about the availability of the land and how land is shared with multiple usage, yeah, and how encroachment has taken place, and possibly the right-of-way issues of what is there for the cars, what is there for the people who are walking, what space is available, is there a social implication? So it's on a bigger picture in terms of how we bring in smart mobility into planning or into sort of conceptualization. I think there's a bigger picture in terms of social impact too, because if people are already used to using a particular right-of-way or road space with, especially in ASEAN countries, yeah, we see that there's sort of a juxtaposition of activities. So how do you, move away people who have already been using, say, the right-of-way of the rail or the rail tracks or of the roads? How do we actually move them? We see this in Vietnam. We see this in Burma, where you have all those, sort of traders selling, and when the train comes by, they move away, or on the roads itself, that they actually, combine all sorts of activities combined together. So these sort of things also should be in our planning approach, right? The things that we have to consider. So the dichotomy is just not about the people who are using, whether it's technocentric or people-centric, but there's also a social element that is very big here, right? I mean, my 2 cents here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Then we have another question from the audience, which is about gender. Do we have any examples from ASEAN of how women and vulnerable groups needs, their needs are taken into account in transport and mobility planning? Do we have any examples from ASEAN where the gender issue has been a part of the planning process?
I know from my colleagues in India that there have been operators of public transport, sorry, that has very proactively included women in transport, public transport planning, from making sure that that there are much more female drivers, that ticket officers, everything people working in the sector were women, making sure that there were bathrooms and changing facilities for smaller kids, nursing rooms, all of that available, catering for the specific needs of women. So it is definitely happening, but it's not systematically done around the world.
And may I add to this one? In our sustainable urban mobility planning, in all of KIAT's technical assistance work, we mainstream the gender equality, disability, and social inclusion, and also civil society engagement, collectively known as JETC CSE, into all of the different technical assistance activities. So in our SUMP work, there was we make sure that the team is representative of that to begin with, that it is diverse, and also undertaking the focus group discussions, making bespoke sort of in-reach into these communities as well. So our hope is the planning is very much cognizant of this inclusivity angle, universal design, but I worry this is sort of where it ends, because you sort of it's really the other side. It's the government counterparts and the people we interface, we deal with. It's quite clear, quite obvious, and it's it's in government, it's in operators, it's in national, subnational, city levels. It's that as sort of Marianne was saying, amongst public transport operators, they're not representative of the clientele, of the people that they serve, and there's not enough instances of that diversity, whether it is gender or physical abilities and the like. So it's a challenge that hopefully can be addressed. And just responding to Dr. Ashita's question as well, because just on the theme about the lot of other land uses on the right of way, like street vendors and maybe freight and logistics sort of operators. In our SUMP work, we've actually made engaged a freight and quite a number of experts that looked at this particular area, where we are cognizant of the social angle, and we're not trying to abolish, but I don't know if it's for better or worse, but maybe have them more formalized. They still trade, they still exist, but in a way that is compatible with the different so that it doesn't hinder on transportation and other requirements, the requirements of the less able to move on footpaths, for instance, because people are selling things there. So we developed this concept of having vendor hubs. So there's micro ones, and then there's bigger ones, and then there's really large market hubs as well. And these street street vendors can actually go and they set up shop, and then they sell stuff from more centralized areas, I guess. And then with that, you also get the benefit. You give them locker and storage spaces. You give them power, access to clean water. There's a lot of these other facilities that hopefully can help transition into their business into, I guess, a more formalized setting, but also not sort of destroying people's livelihoods who have made their, that's the sort of work that they do. So thanks for raising a very, very, very important point in the transport and land use space as well.
Ashita, do you have a comment too?
No, good explanation from here. Yeah, so it's good to know that efforts are being made on that. It always concerns me when I see this sort of mixture of activities. I mean, we talk about shared streets and all that. That's all very planned and very formalized activities. But when you have, informal activities happening at the same space, it is worrying because safety becomes paramount, right? Yep. So it's good to see efforts made.
Yeah,
thanks.
And maybe I can add that ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund, the umbrella on top of this session here, actually is working with the city of Davao to set up an education system for the bus drivers, and this question is absolutely one of the things that will be included in this training program. Okay, any more questions from the audience? While waiting for those, I have one question more, which I would ask to our panel, which is about the COVID situation we just have been through. And it has been completely amazing that during COVID, the horrible COVID situation, the cities have been very easy to drive in, to bike in, to walk in, no noise, no pollution, traffic pollution at all. How do you think that this new experience that everybody has had, how has that influenced our behavior? Has it influenced our behavior? Has it led to some permanent transitions, different choices? We have been told for 2 years that we are not allowed to crowd in public transportation. So we were, if we wanted to travel, we had to do individual transportation, either walking, bicycling, or driving our individual car. So there are both pros and cons. What has this COVID situation given us, and will some of it still remain in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Marianne, first, if you have a reflection on that.
I think we are slowly returning to the old normal instead of a new normal. But I think where I see it most is on those who have the option to work more flexible and work from home, do that, and that way save some commuting. Also in the cities that are very much congested. I was in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, in Ireland, and there it said that because traffic is so congested, that people choose to work from home. But we're also seeing, for instance, here in Denmark, where I am, that young people during COVID stopped cycling and went into their parents' cars that were parked outside because they were not using them, and they are staying in the cars. So we still need to have a focus on this, and it didn't fix it. There was a great momentum and a great opportunity, and hopefully what I hope we will see is that some people will, or they experienced that streets could be different, that it could be used differently, and hopefully we will bring that and take that into innovating and redesigning and reshaping our streets and the purposes we use them for.
You're on mute, Soren.
Sorry. Yeah, classic. I was actually asking you if you had any reflections on this.
Yes, sure. It's a very timely and it's a great question. Kiat has just we've just concluded a 1.5-year activity with Transjakarta supporting their pandemic management and post-pandemic sort of transformation as well. And you know, Transjakarta as just one example, when you know societies and you know they went to hell and back, and we know the sort of impact of the public transport mode share. So Transjakarta went from about 1 million passengers a day in the end of 2019 down to, I think it was 100,000, so 90% drop at the height of the pandemic, and even now it's only up to about 400 or 500,000. So it is it's very, very difficult, and it's a new context for societies and particularly for operators. And I think we can't go back to the old normal. We need to chart. It is a new world. Biosecurity is front of mind amongst people. We need to put in place the sort of ways to safeguard that, whether it is to sort of guard against contact surface, droplet, aerosol transmissions through. Really, it's like past times when we had waterborne diseases, and that's when cities were set up with sanitation infrastructure and the like. But these days, it's about ventilation. It's about these new ways of designing public spaces, and public transport is very much a part of that. So more needs to be done, and the most forward-thinking operators, the ones there's a lot that can be done, and we know the technologies and the interventions, and not just doing it well, but also communicating it to the public well as well, communicating that safety angle, embarking on passenger win-back campaigns, for instance, and also imbuing probably greater organizational resilience as well. We know that there's a lot of things lurking around the corner. Climate change, there could be new variants, there could be other black swan events, biosecurity risks, and organizations need to be agile, they need to be more resilient, they need to have crisis preparedness and response plans. There's a lot of that I think the pandemic itself revealed or made more apparent as challenges that have been buried away for too long. So all of this, all of society needs to be all sectors, I think, will be affected going forward on this.
Thank you, Yael. I think we have a raised hand from Jens Christian Ries.
Yes, thank you very much. Really interesting debates. Now, it's just a reflection I've read in the I don't know which UK newspaper it was yesterday, but apparently, I mean, these rising petrol prices because of the crisis, the war crisis in Europe has pushed, I mean, within a month or two, maybe it's also the summer coming, but has doubled the number of bicyclists in London area. So I think, I mean, we have different outside pushes or pulls basically affecting how people are commuting. And I think we, of course, have to accommodate for that. Living in Copenhagen for many years, I've seen how suddenly 2/3 of the roads are taken up by bicycle lanes now, and just one lane left for cars. And I think that's quite extraordinary to see how this planning has been followed up by, I mean, that a push from a lot of people wanting to commute this way actually creates another type of planning. So just to comment that there are these outside factors suddenly pushing people towards doing things differently. Thank you.
Yes, Ashita, do you have a special comment on this?
Well, I'm having a little bit of a thunder and lightning here in Malaysia. You know how it is in Kuala Lumpur. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it starts raining, right? I'll try my best. Hopefully I don't get kicked out. I mean, in regards to the Malaysian experience right now, I mean, we've heard about the new norm during the pandemic, that 2 years that we've all experienced. And then now I think it's another new norm because what we see here is revenge traffic. So people are coming out with vengeance, and the roads, the main arterials, the main highways in Kuala Lumpur particularly seem to be having abnormal sort of a pattern, right? So we see this, I consider this abnormal, and I think it needs a little bit of time to settle before we say it is the new norm or it goes back to a period before the pandemic. I'm not sure, because I think this is, you know, unprecedented. It's very new. We're all experiencing it. Patterns have changed, whether people are working from home or whether people are now in a family, whether they are sharing or rather whether they used to share cars, or share their trips out, and now they're all preferring to drive on their own. So I myself am trying to reconcile and understand why this, you know, sort of exodus of traffic now. You know, there's immense, even at an off-peak period, we are having to have a double the travel time. So it is quite interesting to see. So I mean, we've guessed this, right? As transport planners, we have guessed that we will have this revenge traffic or people coming back in vengeance because they've been cooped up and not allowed to come out. So it is quite interesting. So we'll probably wait and see what is the new norm, or what is the pattern, or is it going to go back to where we were earlier? I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashita. I think we'll getting close to the closing session of this session. Maybe you could scroll a little forward to the end slides. Yeah. And just a quick reflection on the last discussion we have had here. I think it's very it's very challenging. The last many years we've been going through. We have had the financial crisis, which put a huge pressure on finances, the economic environments in cities and businesses, and so on and so forth. We've had the Corona crisis, which has, you know, put us all back in our own homes and working from home, not being able to travel, not being able to crowd in public spaces and in public transportation, and now in Europe we have this war in Ukraine, which Jens Christian Riese mentioned, which is affecting the oil prices and the gasoline prices and the power prices on power, electricity all around the world, which is also, you know, a big pushback. So what cities actually have felt the last, let's say 10 years, is that they are very vulnerable, and there will successively, within a few years' time, there will be crisis that will put a pressure on the transport system, on the planning systems, on health systems, and so on and so forth. So we settling in the big cities is also a very
เมือง
vulnerable
เฮาในด้านแออัดระบบแออัดและว่าเศรษฐกิจต่างๆแล้วเฮาต้องสำคัญสุดนี้เฮาต้องเบิ่งว่าการเคลื่อนไหวในเรื่องรถล้าหรือว่าการเคลื่อนไหวของพลเมืองคนนี่อันนี้เป็นปัญหาในตัวเมืองหลายๆตัวเมืองในตอนนี้แล้วเฮาจะเฮ็ดแนวใดเพื่อที่จะเฮ็ดให้นครของเฮานี่ได้มีการเดินทางหรือว่าแก้ปัญหาแนวใดในการสัญจรระหว่างการสัญจรแล้วกับพลเมืองคนอันนี้เป็นสิ่งที่สิ่งสุดท้ายที่ข้าพเจ้าคิดในตอนนี้
cities and giving us a huge vulnerability.
ដែលវាជាអ្វីមួយដែលថាយើងអាចធ្លាប់ប្រចាំទៅយើងអាចចំណាយពេលវេលាទៅលើដោះស្រាយបញ្ហាវិបត្តិទាំងអស់នេះ
So let's just
Bên chứng Nikon chi cả trong
Else I would
Cuối
thank
cùng thì tôi xin phép sẽ cảm ơn các chuyên gia của chúng ta rất là nhiều.
presentations about how we can actually in a smart way work with transport planning, so we can inform the politicians and decision makers to take the right decisions. What we heard Richard Strozen said was that we have all the solutions. We just need to find the right solutions, and the right solutions, that's about the local context, that's about how the city want to prosper, what are the visions for the city, where do they want to develop, and hence we can find the solution, because there are solutions in the drawers of all our desks. We just need to find the right solutions, and what he presented here was a system that is super well functioning for taking all the right decisions. We heard Marianne talk about the gender issue, and when she first talked about this for me some 6 years ago, I thought immediately, well, yes, of course, I've been planning for male mobility for all my life. Why haven't I considered that there are, of course, different needs depending on if you are a child, if you're young, if you are old, if you are a woman, if you are a man. So this is definitely an issue that is very important to take into account into the mobility planning going forward. And then we heard about Yel Wong's very important work with the strategies about how can we develop mobility strategies for the future, and that's very, very important. Often when we are talking about mobility and transportation and planning, we are looking at the old statistics from years behind. All the statistics we have on our table is at least 1 year old or more. But when we are designing for the future, making the future mobility plans, well, we're designing for the next 100 years, because if we're building a rail line or a bridge or anything else within the mobility sector, it will guide the urban development for the next many years. It will be there for the next 100 years. So why rely so much on old data? I think that was a very important point, to look at the strategies. Let's instead look at what do we want to achieve. So thank you very much for very insightful presentations and a very good discussion afterwards. Thank you very much. I think I have just a few housekeeping announcements. We would very much like to have an evaluation of the session, so please go in and look at the QR code and give us your opinion about the session. You can have a certificate sent if you would like that after the event. Please, next slide. And then I'll just point at the day 2 tomorrow, where we also have a session 3 and 4. Session 3 about how digitalization can help create resilient and inclusive cities. That was part of what I was just talking about before. And session 4, how digitalization can help improve smart city knowledge and capacities. So please log into these sessions. Please, next slide. And here is a short guide how you can join the sessions. So you can sign into your Zoom account and go to the top bar, address bar, and click on the link, and then you can join the lobby and continue from there. So there's a guidance on the Zoom link, so you can join the next sessions tomorrow. Next slide, please. So I think that was all for me and for ASEAN Australian Smart Cities Trust Fund session 2 here about how digitalization can reduce traffic congestion in cities. Thank you for all your participations and for your good questions. Thanks to all the presenters. Thank you. Have a good day.